The first thing I noticed was the tape measure stretched across my father's counter. The second was the man holding it. He stood beneath the blue and pink neon sign in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than our monthly electric bill, while two surveyors moved through Bennett's diner as if the place were already empty. One aimed a laser at the ceiling, the other wrote measurements beside the pie case. It was 5:47 in the morning. The front door was supposed to be locked, and strangers were measuring the only place in Pittsburgh that had ever felt like mine. I stepped inside. "You have 30 seconds to tell me why you're in my diner before I call the police." The man turned without flinching. He was tall, dark-haired, and far too calm for someone caught trespassing before sunrise. The property manager let us in. Adrian Cole, quote. He offered his hand. I ignored it. That's supposed to mean something? One surveyor stopped moving. Adrian did not. Cole Urban Group purchased this building yesterday. That includes the commercial space. My stomach tightened. I knew the building had been listed. But the previous owner had promised us time. Apparently, time had ended before breakfast. Are you tearing it down? I asked. Adrian glanced around the diner, taking in the cracked stools, the old photographs, and the water stain above booth 3. I haven't decided. The answer was worse than yes. Yes would have been a clean wound. I haven't decided meant my father's grill and 40 years of other people's memories were waiting on a spreadsheet to be compared against a hotel lobby. Then stop measuring until you do. And Adrian closed the folder in his hand. The electrical system is out of code. The rear plumbing has repeated pressure failures. Revenue declined 12% over the last 2 quarters. I stared at him. You've owned the place for less than a day. I read the records. Congratulations. I work here. His gaze settled on me. Haven't dominated. Bo there. And the Levin dominated. Rala dominated. Congratulations. You've owned the place for less than a day. Congratulations, Picted. Congratulations, Picted. Congratulations. That does not make the problems less real. I should have thrown him out. Instead, I tied on my apron because at 6, Frank Delaney would want black coffee and 2 eggs over easy, and Mrs. Kaplan would complain if her toast came out too dark. The diner had survived my father's heart attack. 3 broken refrigerators, a kitchen fire, and 1 winter when the pipes froze solid. It could survive a billionaire with a folder. That was what I told myself while I turned on the grill. Adrian dismissed the surveyors but remained near the counter. You can leave too, I said. I would like to observe the morning service. I'd like to observe you getting hit by a bus, but we don't always get what we want. 2. The corner of his mouth shifted, as if he had filed the sentence for later. By 6:15, every stool was occupied. Malik arrived 7 minutes late and rushed toward the dish station. Tess came in behind him, tied her apron, and froze when she saw Adrian. Who's the funeral? She asked. Our new landlord, I said. Same thing. Then the printer spat out 6 tickets. A delivery driver blocked the side entrance, and Frank sent back his eggs because 1 yolk had broken. I stopped caring who owned the walls. I moved on instinct, toast down, bacon turned, coffee refilled, plates wiped, Tess calling orders in the rhythm I had known since I was 16. Adrian stayed out of the way until Malik slipped near the sink and a rack of glasses tilted toward the floor. Adrian caught it before it crashed. You can put that down, I said. I'm aware. He set the rack safely on the counter and looked at Malik. Are you hurt? Malik shook his head. Adrian did not lecture him or glance around to see who had noticed. He grabbed the mop, cleaned the spill, and set out the warning sign. A man like him was supposed to look helpless around a mop. Instead, he moved with the ease of someone who had done this before. When the rush eased, Adrian said, Your morning volume is stronger than the reports suggested. Maybe your reports don't order pancakes. Your margins are still too thin. And yet the pancakes continue to exist. Tess appeared with a coffee pot and filled his cup without asking. You planning to close us? Adrian looked around the room. Frank had raised his newspaper, but was no longer reading it. 2 nurses at booth 4 had gone silent over their omelets. No final decision has been made, he said. Tess's expression hardened. That's rich person language for yes. It is accurate language. 1. People don't pay rent with accuracy. Something shifted in Adrian's face. His jaw tightened. His fingers closed around the cup. For half a second, he looked less like a developer and more like someone who had heard those words before. Then, the moment disappeared. After the rush, he asked to see the kitchen. I showed him the bad wiring near the back door, the leaking pipe beneath the prep sink, and the refrigerator compressor that sounded like a dying lawnmower. He listened without interrupting. "You think I don't know what needs fixing?" I asked. "I think you know every problem in this building. Then why are you looking at me like I'm one of them?" "Because you are treating exhaustion as a business model." The words hit too close. I laughed once. "My father kept this place open for 38 years. Your father is not here." The kitchen went still. Adrian's expression changed immediately. That was poorly said. It was accurately said. I turned back to the grill before he could see my hands shake. My father had died 6 years earlier, 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave for a restaurant apprenticeship in Chicago. I postponed the move to help with the diner, then stopped answering the chef who had offered me the job. By the time I realized I had stayed, staying had become the shape of my life. Lucas used to say I spoke about the diner like it was a sick relative. He lasted 3 years before packing 2 suitcases and telling me I had built an altar out of unpaid invoices. His final words still returned whenever the room went quiet. "You don't love this place because it makes you happy. You love it because it can't leave you." I hated him for saying it. I hated myself more for remembering. Adrian left before noon with no promise beyond another inspection. At 2:13, Tess showed me a message from Carla, our weekday server. Her sister's hotel was hiring, and Carla wanted something stable. At 2:26, Malik asked whether I thought we would still be open next month. I said yes, too quickly. By 5, the rumor had spread through the neighborhood. Customers asked questions I could not answer. I kept pouring coffee as if certainty could be produced by the pot. The night shift stretched thin. Tess stayed late. Malik missed an online class to help with dishes. I burned my wrist, dropped a plate, and snapped at a man who asked whether we were becoming a cocktail bar. After closing, I sat alone in booth 7, where my father used to do payroll with a pencil behind his ear. I poured 1 cup of coffee and cut the last slice of lemon pie, then stared at both until the coffee went cold. The diner sounded different after midnight. Every hum was louder. Every crack in the vinyl looked permanent. I told myself I could handle the morning with 3 people. I told myself the night shift would be manageable. I told myself a great many things that depended on nobody else leaving. My phone buzzed against the table. Carla's resignation was polite and apologetic. Before I finished reading it, a second message appeared from Dean, our night cook. He had accepted a position at a 24-hour pharmacy cafeteria and would not return after Friday. I read both messages twice. Then the front lock turned. I stood so fast my knee struck the table. Adrian stepped inside, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. He looked at the cold coffee, the untouched pie, and whatever was showing on my face. "We're closed," I said. He removed his coat and laid it over a stool. Beneath it, his white shirt sleeves were already rolled to his elbows. So I was told. He looked toward the dark kitchen. "What time does the night shift start tomorrow?" Adrian arrived at 9:53 the next night, wearing black trousers, a white button-down, and shoes polished enough to reflect the neon sign. He looked prepared to negotiate a merger, not refill ketchup bottles. I leaned against the counter and held out the spare uniform I had found in the storage closet. The shirt was mustard yellow, 1 size too small, and had Bennett's Diner stitched over the pocket in peeling red thread. "This is what you wear," I said. He looked at the shirt, then at me. "You selected this personally. I value tradition. You value revenge. You haven't earned revenge yet. God, 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 God." He took the uniform without another word and changed in the employee bathroom. When he came out with the sleeves straining around his arms, Tess turned away so he would not see her laughing. I started him with coffee because coffee was difficult to ruin. Within 12 minutes, he had overfilled Mrs. Kaplan's cup, forgotten cream for booth 2, and addressed Frank Delaney as Sir so many times that Frank asked whether Adrian was trying to sell him insurance. Adrian responded to every correction with the same controlled nod, which made correcting him less satisfying than I had expected. "You don't have to announce the full order when you set it down," I told him. "They know what they ordered. Confirmation reduces errors. Not when you're saying turkey club, no tomato, extra pickle, to a man who has eaten the same sandwich here every Tuesday since 1998. Adrian glanced toward the booth. "That seems statistically unhealthy." Frank raised his newspaper. "I heard that. Rockefeller." By 11, the diner had filled with nurses finishing shifts, warehouse workers starting theirs, and 3 college students who ordered 1 plate of fries and occupied a booth for 2 hours. Adrian learned quickly, but he moved like a man who had never been required to carry more than 1 object at a time. I showed him how to balance 3 plates along his forearm. He tried, made it 4 steps, and sent a ramekin of coleslaw sliding into his own shirt pocket. Malik choked on a laugh near the dish station. Adrian looked down at the pocket. "Is this part of the training?" "Advanced level," I said. "Most people don't reach it on the first night." He removed the ramekin and kept serving. The rush came just after midnight when a bus from the hospital stopped outside and 14 people walked in together. Tess took one side of the room. I handled the grill. Malik disappeared beneath a mountain of dishes. Adrian stood near the register with 3 tickets in his hand and the expression of a man watching a building catch fire. "Booth 5 needs drinks," I called. "Counter needs 2 menus. Table 9 is ready to order." "There is no table 9. "Exactly. M. Find out why someone wrote 9 on the ticket." For 1 second, he froze. Then something in him shifted. He stopped asking what came next and started watching the room. He moved faster after that. Not gracefully, but intelligently. He grouped coffee refills with check deliveries. He repeated orders only when someone changed something. He brought Tess clean silverware before she asked. When the printer jammed, he opened it, cleared the paper, and had it running before I could leave the grill. The surprise was not that he could solve problems. The surprise was that he did not need to be the person in charge while solving them. He listened when Tess redirected him. He apologized when he dropped a fork. When a customer complained that his burger was taking too long, Adrian did not promise a refund or summon me like an employee. He said, "The kitchen is handling a full room. Your order is next, and I'll bring you coffee while you wait." The man accepted that. At 1:15, a delivery driver named Luis reached the register and checked his wallet twice. He had eaten a bowl of chili and half a grilled cheese while waiting for an order from the apartments upstairs. "I left my cash in the other jacket," he said quietly. "I can come back tomorrow." I was about to tell him not to worry about it when Adrian entered something on the register and slid the receipt into the drawer. "It's handled. It's handled. Adrian/Desed. Adrian/Desedev1. Adrian/Desed. Adrian/Desedev. 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 Adrian/Desedev." Luis looked embarrassed. "I didn't ask you to. You didn't. You didn't." Adrian turned toward the coffee station before the gratitude could become public. I checked the register later. He had paid full price, including tax and tip, and had not marked it as a business expense. When the last hospital worker left, I found Adrian at the sink with his sleeves rolled higher, washing glasses because Malik had fallen behind. "You know we have a dishwasher," I said. "I have met it. It appears overwhelmed. Malik is the dishwasher. Malik is the dishwasher. Then he also appears overwhelmed." Malik, from behind a stack of plates, said, "I like him better now." "Nobody asked," I told him. Adrian handed me a clean coffee mug. There was a small red line across his wrist where a tray had caught him. I noticed because I had begun noticing too much. The way he loosened his collar after midnight, the way he listened with his whole face when someone spoke, the way he never checked his phone while a customer needed him. At 2, Tess left after making me promise I would not stay until sunrise. Malik followed 10 minutes later. Adrian remained, wiping the counter with slow, precise movements. I locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. "You survived," I said. "Your confidence in me is moving. You spilled coleslaw on yourself, and yet the business remains operational." I poured 2 cups of coffee before I could think better of it. He watched me cut the last slice of lemon pie in half and carry both plates to booth 7. "Is this another part of the training?" he asked. "No. This is where we discuss everything you did wrong. We may need more pie." He sat across from me, still wearing the ridiculous yellow shirt, and for the first time since meeting him, he looked almost ordinary, tired, mostly. His hair had fallen out of place, and there was coffee on one cuff. I opened the notebook where I had tracked the shift. "You overfilled 6 cups, delivered 1 turkey melt to the wrong booth, forgot table numbers twice, and nearly insulted Frank's cardiovascular health." His cardiovascular health insulted itself. I laughed before I could stop. The sound surprised both of us. Adrian's expression softened, not triumphant, just pleased. It made me look down at the pie. We reviewed sales, food waste, staffing, and the dead hour between 11 and midnight. Adrian asked questions without making pronouncements. He wanted to know why we kept 3 kinds of syrup when only 1 sold consistently, why the meatloaf portion was larger on Wednesdays, and why I refused to increase coffee prices by 25 cents. "Because some of our customers count quarters," I said. He did not argue. Instead, he wrote something in a small black notebook. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. That usually means something." He turned the notebook around. Under operations, he had written, "Do not price regulars out of routine." I read it twice. That doesn't sound like a billionaire sentence. "I contain multitudes." The joke landed too easily. I hated that. I hated more that I was beginning to enjoy the version of him who appeared after the tie came off and the room emptied. We sat there until the coffee cooled, sharing pie while rain tapped against the window. Before he left, I handed him a folded black apron from beneath the counter. It was clean, the straps repaired, the fabric soft from years of washing. "Tomorrow," I said. He took it carefully. "You're assuming I'm returning." "You said 3 weeks. 5 night shifts each week," he replied. "Unless you prefer 7. Don't make me regret teaching you sarcasm." The following night, Adrian arrived 2 minutes early, wearing sensible shoes. He remembered Frank's sandwich, Mrs. Kaplan's cream, and the nurse's separate checks. Halfway through the shift, I found his black notebook open beside the register. I expected figures: labor costs, table turnover, revenue per seat. Instead, he had written, "Frank, extra pickles. Hates being called sir. Mrs. Kaplan toast light. Ask about daughter's surgery. Luis usually comes after 1 a.m. My short on Tuesdays before payday. Booth, 4 nurses, fresh pot, after midnight." At the bottom of the page was one final note. "Noah does not eat unless someone puts food in front of him." I closed the notebook before he returned, but the words stayed with me, long after the diner lights went dark. By the end of Adrian's first week, the yellow uniform had stopped looking ridiculous on him. I told myself that was because the fabric had stretched, not because I had gotten used to seeing him behind the counter. He arrived before every shift, tied on the repaired black apron I had given him, and checked the coffee stations without being asked. The first time I found him restocking sugar packets, I accused him of corporate espionage. The second time, I left a clean apron folded beside the register before he arrived. Neither of us mentioned it. That was how most things changed between us, not with a conversation, but with one person doing something small and the other pretending not to notice. Adrian learned the rhythm of the diner faster than I wanted him to. He knew the delivery drivers came in waves after midnight, that the college students always asked for separate checks after claiming they would share, and that Tess needed coffee before anyone spoke to her after 10. He stopped calling Frank sir. He learned to carry 3 plates without looking terrified. He even mastered the milkshake machine, although I suspected spite had motivated him. "Vanilla," I said one night as he reached for chocolate syrup. Booth 6 ordered chocolate. Booth 6 changed his mind 2 minutes ago. Adrian looked toward the customer, who lifted a hand apologetically. "You're enjoying this," he said. "Immensely. The first time he set food aside for me, I nearly threw it away on principle. It was half a turkey sandwich wrapped in wax paper, with my name written across the top. I found it beside the grill after the rush. "I didn't order this," I said. Adrian was refilling the pie case. "That is generally how being fed works. You cannot make decisions about what I eat, then decide to eat it." I glared at him. "You conceded, Amender. You conceded, Amender." I Karened. "The pie case." He glanced at the clock. "It is 1:30 in the morning, and your last meal was coffee at 6. "Coffee is not a meal." I am relieved we agree. I ate the sandwich because I was hungry, not because he had noticed. A few nights later, I taught him my father's pancake method. Adrian insisted there could not possibly be a meaningful difference between pouring batter clockwise or counterclockwise. I told him that was because he had no respect for science. The truth was simpler. My father had taught me to turn the bowl clockwise 3 times before each pour, and I had never stopped. Adrian watched the movement, then copied it exactly. His first pancake came out uneven. His second was almost right. By the fourth, the edges browned the way they were supposed to. He slid it onto a plate and looked at me for approval with such unguarded concentration that my chest tightened. "Acceptable," I said. "That is the highest praise I have received from you. Don't get used to it." We became good at moving around each other. I would reach for a plate and find it already in his hand. He would step behind me just as I turned from the grill, one palm hovering near my waist without touching. During rushes, our conversations shrank to single words. "Coffee. Check. Behind you. Hot pan." Somehow, he always knew which one I meant. The kitchen was too narrow for 2 men our size, especially when one of them had shoulders designed for boardrooms and inconvenient proximity. I began noticing the warmth of him before I noticed where he was. I began stepping aside more slowly than necessary. The night a drunk customer grabbed Tess's wrist, Adrian was at the far end of the counter. I was beside her before the man finished saying her name. "Let go," I told him. He laughed and tightened his hand. Adrian crossed the room but stopped a few feet away instead of taking over. "Tess," he said calmly, "would you like me to call the police?" She looked at the customer. "Wear that with not calm." "No, I'd like Noah to remove his hand." I did. Adrian stayed near enough to help, but he let Tess decide what happened next. After the man stumbled outside, Adrian locked the door behind him and asked if she wanted to go home. She said she wanted fresh coffee and 5 minutes to complain about men. He poured it without defending his gender. Later, while cleaning the grill, I caught my wrist against the edge of a hot pan. I hissed and pulled back. Adrian appeared beside me with the first aid kit before I could reach the sink. "It's nothing." "You say that about everything." He turned on the cold water and held my wrist beneath it. His fingers closed gently around my forearm. The burn was small, but the contact was not. The kitchen noise seemed to fall away. I could feel his thumb near my pulse. He looked down at the reddening skin, jaw tight, as if I had done something personally offensive. "You need to be more careful," he said. "You sound like Tess. That is the most alarming thing you have said to me." When he released me, neither of us moved immediately. His hand remained open between us. I could have stepped back. He could have. Instead, we stood too close beside the sink, while water ran over my wrist. Then Malik pushed through the swinging door carrying a stack of trays and said, "Am I interrupting a medical emergency or something we should all pretend not to see?" I pulled away so quickly I struck my hip against the counter. Adrian shut off the water. "Medical emergency," he said. Malik looked at the burn. "That tiny thing? Catastrophic," Adrian replied. Malik grinned for the rest of the shift. Lucas came in on a Thursday just before midnight. I recognized his reflection in the pie case before I turned around. He looked mostly the same, blonde hair cut shorter, expensive wool coat. The careful posture of someone who wanted you to know he had become happier without you. "Hey, Noah." My hands went still around the coffee pot. "Lucas. Adrian was entering an order at the register. He looked up once, then again when Lucas reached across the counter and touched my arm. The touch was brief and familiar enough to hurt. "I heard about the building," Lucas said. "I'm sorry. It's not closed yet." I know. I just thought maybe this was the moment." He had taken a sous chef position at a restaurant downtown and said they needed someone experienced with breakfast service and kitchen management. The salary was better than anything I had ever paid myself. The hours ended before midnight. There were benefits. "You'd be good there," Lucas said. "You could finally have a life outside this place." I felt the old argument moving beneath his words. Across the diner, Adrian set a spoon down harder than necessary. Lucas followed my glance. "Is that the new owner?" "He's working the shift." "Of course he is," Lucas said. "Men like that always want to see how the little people live before they renovate." Adrian appeared beside us with a fresh cup of coffee Lucas had not requested. "You seemed finished with the first one." His voice was perfectly polite, which meant he was furious. Lucas smiled. "You must be Adrian, and you must be someone who speaks confidently about people he has not met." "Occupational hazard. What occupation is that?" I stepped between them before the diner became the site of a very expensive murder. Lucas left his card beneath my hand and told me to think about the job. When the door closed behind him, Adrian collected the untouched coffee. "Do you plan to accept?" he asked. "Why do you care?" His expression changed. For 1 second, I thought he might say something honest. Instead, he looked toward the register. Losing the manager would affect the operational review. The words landed colder than they should have. "Right," I said. "The review." We barely spoke for the rest of the shift. After closing, I brought 2 coffees to booth 7 out of habit, but neither of us touched the pie. Adrian stared through the rain-streaked window for a long time. Then he asked, "If the diner survived without needing you here every night, would you still choose to stay?" I opened my mouth with the answer I had used for 6 years. Nothing came out. The answer stayed with me for 3 days. Adrian did not ask again, and I did not offer one. We worked around the question the way we worked around a broken tile near the grill, careful not to step on it, careful not to admit we knew exactly where it was. Lucas's card remained in my wallet. Adrian's black notebook remained beside the register. Everything else continued as usual, except usual had become dangerous. I knew how Adrian took his coffee, now black for the first cup, 1 sugar after midnight. He knew I rubbed the scar on my thumb when I was worried. We had learned too much about each other to pretend we were strangers, and not enough to call whatever was happening by its name. The storm arrived on Saturday night with no patience for gradual entrances. Rain slammed against the windows just after 11, turning the neon sign into a smear of blue and pink across the glass. The weather alert on Tess's phone warned of flash flooding in low areas. By midnight, water had begun pushing beneath the rear door in a thin, dark line. "That drain backs up every heavy storm," I said, grabbing towels from beneath the counter. "How heavy?" Adrian asked. A second stream curled around the leg of the prep table. "Heavier than this if we're unlucky." Tess sent the remaining customers home before the buses stopped running. Malik left to catch the last one. Adrian stayed without being asked. We spent the next hour fighting water with whatever the diner could spare. I dragged boxes of dry goods onto higher shelves while Adrian cleared the floor drain with a bent wire hanger in language I would not have expected from a man who owned 6 hotels. The rain found a leak above booth 3, then another near the back hall. We placed stock pots beneath both. When the rear door shuddered under a gust, Adrian braced his shoulder against it while I shoved a rubber mat into the gap. Water splashed over our shoes and soaked the legs of our pants. "Still enjoying the operational review?" I shouted over the storm. "Immensely," he said through clenched teeth. "Your drainage has personality." A section of ceiling plaster cracked above the counter. Adrian saw it before I did and pulled me backward by the waist just as a wet chunk struck the floor where I had been standing. For one breath, my back was pressed to his chest. His arm locked around me. The kitchen smelled like rain, coffee, and the faint cedar of his soap. "Are you hurt?" he asked near my ear. No. His hand remained against my stomach. Mine had closed around his wrist. Neither of us moved until another burst of thunder shook the windows. Then he released me slowly, as if sudden motion might make the moment more obvious. We went back to work without looking at each other. By 1:30, the water had stopped rising. The diner looked like it had survived a minor shipwreck. Towels covered the floor. Pots collected leaks. Adrian's shirt clung to his shoulders, transparent in places, and his hair had fallen across his forehead. I was not in better condition. Tess had left an old box of staff clothes in the office, so I found Adrian a faded gray sweatshirt with my father's name printed over the chest. "This may be the least expensive thing you have ever worn," I said. He took it and looked at the lettering. "Bennett's open all night." "Not the least valuable," he said. I pretended not to hear the difference. We changed in separate rooms and met at booth 7 after locking the doors. The electricity flickered but held. I made coffee and found one slice of lemon pie left in the case, slightly crooked from the refrigerator being moved away from the leak. Adrian divided it with the side of his fork. Outside, rain ran down the windows in silver sheets. For once, neither of us opened a notebook. "You knew how to clear the drain," I said. "You seem disappointed. You also knew how to mop the first morning." "I have a complicated history with floors." That sounds like something rich people say, before revealing they own a cleaning company. He smiled, but the expression faded as he looked around the dark diner. "My mother worked nights," he said. "Not here. Places like this." I waited. Adrian rarely volunteered anything he could not turn into a business answer. "She worked 2 jobs most of the time. One diner near the bus station let me sit in the last booth until closing. I did homework under the table when the manager complained about me taking up space." His thumb moved along the chipped rim of his cup. "Some nights, dinner was whatever the cook was going to throw away. Other nights, she told me she had eaten at work, so I would finish what we had at home. I was 14, before I understood. She was lying." The room seemed to change around him. I could picture a smaller Adrian in a vinyl booth, pretending not to be tired while his mother carried plates beneath fluorescent lights. "Is that why you bought this building?" I asked. "No. The acquisition team identified the block months ago." He looked toward the counter. "But it is why I knew Malik was overwhelmed. And why I knew Luis was embarrassed. People with money like to imagine poverty announces itself. Usually, it is quiet. It looks like saying you already ate." I thought of the sandwiches he left beside the grill. "You never talk about her. She died before the company became what it is." His voice remained even, but his hand tightened around the cup. "She would have hated the hotels." "Why?" "She distrusted decorative pillows." She distrusted decorative pillows." I laughed. And he did too. Softly. The warmth of it settled between us. Maybe that was why I told him about Lucas. Not the shortened version where he wanted a different life and left. The whole thing. I told him about missed anniversaries, canceled trips, and the night a refrigerator failed during Lucas's birthday dinner. I told him Lucas had waited in our apartment with takeout and candles while I stayed at the diner until 4 in the morning. "He wasn't wrong to leave," I said. "That's the part I hate admitting." Adrian listened without interrupting. The last thing he told me was that I loved this place because it couldn't leave me. My voice thinned around the words. Sometimes I think I proved him right. Plus, Adrian leaned forward. "Staying isn't the same as being stuck. Not when you're allowed to choose it. What if I don't know whether I chose it? Then maybe that is the choice you need to make now, not 6 years ago." His eyes held mine across the table. Dawn, 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 dawn. The storm had softened to a steady rush against the glass. "And what would you choose?" I asked. "Us, if this diner wasn't part of a deal, if you didn't own the building, if I wasn't something in your review." He went still. Then he reached across the table and placed 2 fingers against the inside of my wrist, where my pulse betrayed me immediately. "I would choose." His phone rang. The sound cut through the diner like breaking glass. Adrian closed his eyes once before answering. Lena's voice was faint but urgent through the speaker. I heard the words board vote, approved footprint, and demolition option before he stood and walked toward the counter. His back turned rigid beneath my father's sweatshirt. He spoke in low, controlled sentences, asking for documents and demanding that no filings move forward without him. When he returned, the softness in his face had vanished. "What happened?" I asked. "A project issue. Does it involve the diner?" He hesitated, half a second too long. "I'm handling it." The answer sounded like a door closing. The next night, he arrived in his usual clothes, with every button fastened, and his expression restored to something formal. We worked a full shift without touching. There were no private jokes, no sandwich beside the grill, no shared glance when Frank complained about the pickles. After closing, I poured 2 coffees anyway. Adrian remained standing near booth 7. "About last night," I said. His hand lifted as if he meant to reach for mine again. It hovered between us, close enough that I could remember exactly how his fingers had felt against my pulse. Then he lowered it. "We should keep things professional, Noah." He looked at the untouched lemon pie and stepped back. "It will be better that way." Professional lasted less than 24 hours. Adrian became polite in the way strangers were polite, all careful distance and neutral questions. He still arrived before every shift, still remembered Mrs. Kaplan's cream and Frank's extra pickles, but he stopped leaving food beside the grill. He stopped sitting across from me after closing. Whenever our hands reached for the same plate, he moved first. I told myself the distance was what I wanted. Then I spent every night resenting him for giving it to me. The project issue followed him into the diner even when he refused to name it. Lena called twice during Monday's shift. Adrian stepped outside both times, standing beneath the neon awning while rainwater dripped from its edge. Through the window, I watched his expression harden as he listened. When he returned, he tucked his phone away and asked whether we needed more coffee filters. "What did the board approve?" I asked. His hand paused over the supply cabinet. "I told you I'm handling it. You also told me no final decision had been made." At the time, that was true. The qualifications settled between us, like smoke. On Tuesday, Adrian left his leather portfolio beneath the register when Lena called him outside again. I noticed because a stack of papers had slipped halfway out. The top page showed the block from above, outlined in clean blue lines. Bennett's Diner appeared near the center. For one irrational second, I expected to see the familiar counter, the pie case, maybe even booth 7 preserved inside the drawing. Instead, our space was labeled Main Hotel Entry. A wide set of glass doors cut directly through the kitchen. The neon sign was gone. The rear wall was gone. Everything my father had built had been reduced to a pale rectangle marked Remove Existing Structure. I pulled the plans free with shaking hands. A stamp in the corner read, Preliminary Approval. The date was 9 days before Adrian had taken his first night shift. Before the yellow shirt. Before the 2 coffees. Before he had touched my wrist and told me staying could be a choice. I heard the front door open behind me. Adrian stopped when he saw the papers. The color left his face. "Noah, how long?" I asked. He glanced toward the booths. Tess was serving 2 customers near the window. Malik was stacking cups. "We should discuss this privately. How long have you known they approved demolishing the diner?" His silence answered first. Then he said, "The footprint was approved as one option before I began the review." One option. I held up the drawing. It looks pretty specific, because the original redevelopment plan assumed the commercial units would be cleared. I have been working on an alternative. While letting me believe you were deciding whether this place mattered, I was deciding how to preserve it, without telling me it was already scheduled to disappear. Tess looked toward us. I told her to close early. She did not argue. Within 20 minutes, the customers were gone. Malik had taken the trash out, and the diner belonged to the 2 men who had been pretending ownership meant the same thing to both of them. Adrian spread the plans across the counter. The board approved the most profitable configuration. I delayed the filing and commissioned a second design that keeps the diner within the existing structure. "You commissioned it?" "Yes." "You made the plan?" No. I was trying to solve the problem before bringing you an incomplete proposal." I laughed, but there was nothing amused in it. "You mean before giving me a completed future and asking whether I liked it?" "That is not what I intended. Your intentions have excellent tailoring, Adrian. They still walk into every room before anyone else gets a vote. He flinched, but I was too angry to stop. Every night you sat in that booth and asked what this place meant to me. You asked about my father. You listened while I told you the worst thing anyone had ever said to me. All that time, you knew this plan existed. I knew the board preferred it. I never intended to let them proceed without exhausting every alternative. You should have told me. And created panic before I knew what I could offer. It was my life to panic about. His jaw tightened. I was protecting the employees from uncertainty. No, you were protecting yourself from a conversation you couldn't control. For the first time since I had met him, Adrian raised his voice. I worked beside you because I needed evidence the diner could survive. I challenged the projections. I found financing for the repairs. I have spent every day fighting people who see this place as wasted square footage, and you still thought I was too fragile to know. I thought I could fix it. That is the problem. I slapped the plans flat against the counter. You keep calling control protection because protection sounds kinder. His anger vanished. What replaced it was worse. Recognition. He looked down at the drawing, then toward booth 7. I should have told you. The apology arrived too late and too quietly. I untied my apron. You didn't work beside me, I said. You studied me until you knew how much taking this place would cost. Adrian went completely still. That is not what this was. Maybe, not to you. I folded the apron once and left it beside the register. Tell Tess the review is over. Tell your board they can measure whatever they want. He followed me to the door. Noah, wait. I can guarantee your position. I can create a compensation package. A management contract. I turned, so sharply. He nearly walked into me. You think I'm quitting because the offer isn't generous enough? No, then stop trying to pay your way out of what you did. Rain had begun again outside, soft against the glass. Adrian's hands were open at his sides, empty for once. What do you want me to do? He asked. I hated that part of me wanted to answer. Instead, I opened the door. Figure it out. Without deciding for me. Lucas's restaurant smelled like rosemary, polished steel, and money spent in sensible places. I worked a trial shift 2 days later. The kitchen was organized. The walk-in refrigerator did not rattle. Nobody worried about the ceiling leaking. I handled brunch service easily, and the executive chef offered me the job before I removed my apron. Lucas waited near the back entrance afterward. You'd be good here, he said. I know. Then say yes. I looked through the kitchen window at cooks moving beneath bright white lights. It was everything I had once wanted. Stable hours, better pay, a future that did not depend on a 40-year-old building surviving another winter. But taking the job because Adrian had frightened me away would not be freedom. It would only be another man deciding what losing the diner was supposed to teach me. That same night, Tess called and told me Adrian had worked the shift. Badly? I asked. Not badly, she said. Just not like you. She told me he burned the first batch of pancakes, forgot to reorder pie, and stayed after everyone left. The next morning, Malik sent me a photograph without explanation. Booth 7 sat empty beneath the dying neon glow. 2 cups of coffee rested on the table. One had been drunk. The other was untouched. Lena came to my apartment the following afternoon. She did not ask to come inside. He has withdrawn the hotel entrance plan, she said. The board is furious. That sounds expensive. It is. She handed me a thick envelope. He also removed Cole Urban Group from direct operation of the diner. Independent property management. Long-term lease. Purchase option. Required structural repairs assigned to the building owner. I stared at the envelope but did not take it. What does he want? He did not authorize me to ask for anything. Her expression softened slightly. For what it is worth, I told him weeks ago that hiding the plan would destroy your trust. He believed presenting a solution would matter more than sharing the uncertainty. That sounds like him. It did. I am not sure it does anymore. After she left, I opened the envelope at my kitchen table. The proposal was detailed, formal, and almost painfully fair. Existing employees were protected, rent increases were capped, an independent assessment would determine the purchase price. Adrian had given up direct approval over staffing, menus, and operations. He had even transferred oversight to a property manager I had never met, creating a wall between his authority and my livelihood. There was no personal letter, no apology folded between the contracts, no request that I call him, only a handwritten note on the first page. Please have your own attorney review every term. Change anything that prevents this from becoming your choice. I did exactly what the note told me to do. I hired an attorney named Priya Shah, who charged by the hour and distrusted generous contracts on principle. She read every page twice, circled 6 clauses, and asked why a billionaire developer had agreed to terms that gave him so little control. Because control is how he broke this, I said. Priya looked at me over her glasses but did not ask what I meant. We changed the purchase timeline, added protections against future redevelopment, and required independent bids for every major repair. I expected resistance. Adrian accepted the first 5 revisions without comment and proposed stronger language for the 6th. We handled the negotiations through attorneys and email. His messages were brief, factual, and painfully respectful. He did not ask whether I had forgiven him. He did not mention Booth 7, the storm, or the moment his fingers had rested against my wrist. He treated the diner as mine to negotiate for, even before the documents made that legally true. That should have made everything easier. Instead, every reasonable response felt like evidence that the man I missed was changing somewhere I could not see. I signed the agreement on a gray Thursday afternoon. Priya slid the final page across her desk and handed me a pen. The purchase option would take years to complete. I would still have loan payments, payroll, taxes, and a refrigerator determined to die at the worst possible moment. Nothing about the contract transformed me into someone safe from failure. It gave me something better, the right to fail or succeed through decisions that belonged to me. My hand shook when I signed my name, not because I was afraid of staying, but because staying finally felt chosen. Tess cried when I told her. Malik lifted me off the floor in a hug and nearly injured both of us. Carla agreed to return after we offered predictable hours. Dean did not, but he recommended a cook from his new job who preferred night shifts. The building repairs would take 6 weeks, which meant the diner had to close temporarily. For the first time since my father died, I stood inside Bennett's while it was silent in the middle of the day and did not interpret the silence as death. It sounded like space being made for something new. Adrian never appeared during the first week of repairs. I knew he was in Pittsburgh because Lena mentioned a board meeting during one of our calls, but he kept his distance. Contractors replaced the damaged wiring, repaired the rear drain, and reinforced the ceiling above Booth 3. Every decision came to me, or the independent property manager. Adrian's name appeared only where the building owner was required to authorize payment. He had done what I asked. He had stepped away. I discovered that getting exactly what you demanded could still hurt. One night, I returned after the contractors left. Dust covered the floor, but the counter had been protected beneath canvas sheets. The old neon sign glowed in the front window because I had insisted it remain connected throughout the renovation. I pulled the cover from Booth 7, cleaned the table, and started the coffee machine. The pie case was unplugged, so I stopped at a bakery and bought a lemon pie that cost 3 times what ours did and tasted half as good. I cut the final slice in 2, poured 2 cups, and placed them across from each other. Then I called Adrian. He answered after 1 ring. Noah. The sound of my name in his voice made every prepared sentence disappear. I looked at the empty seat across from me. You still owe me 3 night shifts. There was a long silence. Is that a business request? No. Another silence, softer this time. I'll be there. Rain had started by the time he arrived. Of course it had. Adrian stepped through the unlocked door in a dark coat, his hair damp, his expression guarded in a way I had never seen before. He looked around at the exposed wiring, stacked chairs, and sheets of plastic hanging over the kitchen entrance. Then he saw the coffee. The machine works, he said. Priorities. He removed his coat but did not sit. I received the signed agreement. I know. Your revisions were good. I know that too. A faint smile touched his mouth and disappeared. He stood across from me with both hands resting on the back of the booth as if he needed permission to come closer. I had spent weeks imagining what I would say when I saw him. Most of it had been angry. Some of it had been embarrassingly romantic. None of it felt adequate now. The new agreement, removing yourself, keeping the diner when the other plan would have made more money. Adrian looked toward the covered counter. Because the diner has value. Financial value, community value, historical value. The revised plan still works. He paused. But that is not the whole answer. I assumed not. I kept trying to prove I could save this place before admitting I had no right to define saving for you. He sat across from me, but left his coffee untouched. I thought uncertainty was cruelty. Growing up, uncertainty meant not knowing whether the rent would be paid or whether my mother would come home exhausted enough to collapse. So I built a life where I never presented a problem until I controlled the solution. And you thought that was protection? Yes. His gaze met mine. It was fear with better resources. The honesty hurt more gently than his excuses had. I ran my thumb along the edge of my cup. Lucas wanted me to leave because he thought the diner was ruining my life. You wanted to preserve it without asking what I needed. Different plans. Same assumption, that you could not choose correctly for yourself. Exactly. I was wrong. He said it without defending the work he had done or reminding me how much money he had sacrificed. Just 3 words, placed between us, without armor. I was wrong too, I said. Not about the plans. You deserved everything I said about those. His mouth shifted. But I decided what you felt before giving you a chance to say it. I convinced myself you were studying me, because believing that was safer than believing you might actually care. I did care. Past tense? His eyes changed. The careful distance cracked, and beneath it was the man in my father's sweatshirt, sitting with me while rain covered the windows. No, he said. Nothing about it is past tense. My pulse began moving too fast. Adrian leaned forward, forearms against the table. I kept trying to build a future before asking whether you wanted to be in it. I cannot promise I will never make that mistake in another form. Control is an old habit. He glanced around the diner. But I can promise to recognize it sooner. I can listen before I solve, and I can accept that sometimes the answer will not be mine. I looked at the second cup, the half slice of pie, and the empty space we had spent weeks protecting from each other. Lucas said, loving me meant competing with this place. Ringley, too. Ringley, Ringley. Lucas said, Ringley, Ringley. Lucas said, Ringley, 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 Ring. I'm not asking you to leave this place for me. Adrian's voice lowered. I'm asking if I can stay. 1. The answer reached the part of me that had been waiting 6 years to hear it. Not choose me, instead. Not let me rescue you. Stay. Not as an owner or a savior, but as a man willing to stand beside me while I built a life that had room for both of us. I rose from the booth. Adrian stood too, uncertain until I stepped close enough to feel the warmth of him. You're still terrible at pancakes, I said. I have improved. Debatable. Is this your answer? I caught the front of his shirt and kissed him. For one startled second, he did not move. Then his hand came to my face, careful even when I pulled him closer. The kiss tasted like coffee and rain, and every unfinished conversation between us. It was not dramatic enough to erase what had happened. It did not need to be. Trust was not restored in a single moment. But when we finally separated, Adrian rested his forehead against mine, and neither of us stepped away. Bennett's reopened 7 weeks later. We kept the red counter, the pie case, and every booth that could be repaired. The kitchen received new wiring, a quieter refrigerator, and a drain that no longer surrendered during storms. Malik took over inventory 2 nights a week. Tess refused a promotion but accepted a raise. I hired enough people to take Sundays off. Although the first 3 Sundays I spent standing outside the diner, trying to remember what people did when they were not working, Adrian and I moved slowly. He had no authority over my staff, menu, or schedule. When business decisions affected the building, the property manager handled them formally. When Adrian and I disagreed personally, we did what neither of us was naturally good at. We talked before designing solutions for each other. He still traveled often. He still owned suits that cost more than my car. But whenever he was in Pittsburgh, he took an occasional night shift in the mustard yellow shirt Tess refused to replace. Months after reopening, he returned from Chicago just before midnight. The rush had ended, and rain tapped softly against the front window. Adrian stepped behind the counter, removed his watch, and rolled his sleeves to his elbows. "Where do you need me?" he asked. I placed a clean black apron in his hands. "Booth 4 needs coffee. Frank wants extra pickles. And the new guy keeps pouring pancake batter counterclockwise. Unacceptable." Finally, something we agree on. After closing, I poured 2 coffees and carried the last slice of lemon pie to booth 7. Adrian slid into the seat across from me, tired and smiling, exactly where he had once been afraid to ask to remain. The diner still closes at 2, but booth 7 always has 2 cups waiting, and for the first time in my life, staying no longer feels like being left behind.